So on current ability, I do think that Victor Gyokeres is a better overall centre forward than Benjamin Sesko. However, Sesko is 6 years younger at 21, with Gyokeres soon to be 27, and whilst I usually find it a bit naive when people simply assume that just because one player is young with potential, and the other player is bordering on or maybe even at the elite level but coming into their peak age, that is simply a given that the younger player will reach the older player's current ability within the next 1 to 2 seasons, if at all. With Benjamin Sesko in particular, there are elements of his skill set that do lead me to think that even with some slight improvements, he can not only develop into a better striker than Gyokeres, but potentially down the line also a better striker than Erling Haaland. And so in this video I'm going to be explaining exactly why I think this, analysing why Sesko's goal scoring output doesn't initially look as impressive as you would ideally want from a £60 million plus striker, before looking at who Arsenal and Manchester United should be looking to sign out of the two players given their different systems, or if one of those two should even be the priority at all. But before I go any further, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. They've got a variety of different currencies and retro jerseys, including this 2006-2007 white Manchester United away shirt with Ronaldo 7 on the back, which they did actually send me, as well as this Juventus Zidane shirt from the 90s as well, which are two jerseys that I have been wanting for quite a while, but were incredibly hard to find. If you use code Atlantis at checkout, you'll get a 10% discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comment section below. So when you compare Benjamin Sesko and Victor Gyokeres statistically, using both Gyokeres' Primera Liga and Champions League FBref reports against Sesko's last 365 days, it's clear that when it comes to goal scoring, chance creation and ball progression, Gyokeres is producing the greater output of the two. Now obviously Gyokeres playing in Portugal, which is of course a slightly lower standard than the Bundesliga, is a factor in how impressive he looks. However, I do think it's just lazy analysis to completely dismiss his elite level ability because of the league that he plays in. I mean, Gyokeres is playing for Sporting, who play in the Primera Liga. He can't score goals in another league. If you put Alexander Isak or Victor Osimhen in Portugal, playing in the same Sporting team with the same system, I can't really see how they can produce much greater output than what Gyokeres is currently. And so they wouldn't all of a sudden have a lower ability and become overrated simply because of the league they're playing in. And so you can't deny that the output that Gyokeres is producing is not incredibly impressive, as in the Primera Liga this season he's scoring at a rate of 0.87 per 90, of course sitting in the top 1% of the league, overperforming his non-penalty XG by 0.18 per 90, and also ranking in the high 90th percentiles for nearly all of his chance creation, progressive passing, ball carrying and dribbling metrics, which incidentally also puts to bed the nonsensical idea that Gyokeres is overrated simply because of the amount of penalties he scored, which is certainly a lot to be fair, but he's scoring at a rate of 26 non-penalty goals for every 30 league games he plays, and he's also producing a similar level of output for his non-goal scoring metrics as well. Factor in that in the Champions League he also looks statistically impressive, despite playing in a side that isn't exactly dominant in Europe, and so I don't see how you can simply write off Gyokeres as a one-season wonder, as you could potentially do with Darwin Núñez a few years ago, with Gyokeres also having done it in the Championship, finishing in the team of the season during his last year at Coventry. Sesko, on the other hand, from a goal scoring point of view, doesn't actually look that impressive goal scoring wise. However, he has been overperforming his non-penalty XG by 0.08 per 90 over the past 365 days, although when you do look at his Bundesliga goal scoring metrics from this season, compared with those from last season, you can see that Sesko's non-penalty XG is down by almost 30%, which alongside his pretty absurd but unsustainable XG over performance of 0.38 per 90 last season, suggests to me that the issue is down to Sesko not getting into high value goal scoring positions as frequently this season as he did last season, rather than his finishing when he does get those chances. And so statistically, whilst you could look at Sesko as a bit of a one-season wonder last campaign, hitting a massive purple patch in terms of his finishing and his overperformance of his non-penalty XG, this is where the eye test is needed, as when watching Sesko on sheer ability, he legitimately might have one of the best ball striking techniques I've ever seen. I mean, some of his strikes from long distances are absurd, and he's capable of doing this off of both feet, connecting with power, direction and nominal backlift, all whilst exerting minimal energy with his nonchalant technique. However, whilst this frankly world-class ball striking ability does allow Sesko to score from a variety of different positions and situations, both inside and outside of the box, What I would say is at this point in his career, he hasn't yet developed the elite level off the ball movement or offensive instincts to be able to get into high value goal scoring positions as frequently as someone like Erling Haaland was able to do at his age, or even as Victor Gyokeres can do in the present. His shooting, particularly outside of the box, can also be a bit inconsistent, with that rather loose technique being very hit or miss at the moment, but from the eye test, you can certainly see that Sesko's natural finishing ability is elite. It's just inconsistent. While Sesko's ball striking and finishing almost comes naturally, Gyokeres's is a lot more textbook, requiring greater work over the years, which is probably part of why he is more consistent in front of goal at present. However, if you factor in Sesko's expected natural development over the next few seasons, alongside some quality coaching, once his striking consistency, movement and offensive instincts improve, as I think they will, he has all the other attributes such as his athleticism, physicality, fluidity and aerial ability to be a 20 goal plus Premier League striker. I think if you put Gyokeres in a team like Arsenal, I think he probably gets between maybe 18 to 20 non-penalty goals, whereas Sesko I think is more likely to be around 13 to 15 next season. However, the reason I rate Gyokeres and Sesko so highly, and would value both at probably around £60 million, is because of how complete their skill set is. When initially looking at Sesko, his height of 6'5" and his lanky build may lead you to presuming that his skill set is similar to Osimhen or Haaland, strikers who primarily are going to look to maintain high positions, maybe spinning into the channels to chase balls down the side, but not really dropping deep to link play. However, Sesko's technical ability and ball control enables him to play more like a deeper lying forward at times, being very good at dropping off and linking play efficiently with his back to goal, with short and sharp 1 and 2 touch layoffs, whilst also being able to turn with the ball and either carry it into space or use his quick footwork to dribble past players in close proximity, which can be seen by the fact that he ranks around the 90th percentile for his successful take-ons completed, as well as the percentage of take-ons he completes as well, with his carrying metrics such as his carries into the final third also looking a lot more impressive than you may initially expect. However, Gyokeres is maybe even more complete than Sesko at the moment, as whilst I think Sesko's ball control and quick footwork does make him better at beating players in tight spaces, Gyokeres' pace and power makes him the better of the two when it comes to driving the ball up the pitch into space. As in the Champions League this season, he ranks around the low to mid 90th percentiles for both his progressive carries and his carries into the penalty area, whilst not being as proficient with his take-on success rate, highlighting the difference in skill set between both strikers. Gyokeres thrives when he's able to isolate defenders in space, better when linking play via more direct means with longer passes from deep during the build-up phase, whereas Sesko is the better of the two in more congested central areas. Sesko is also significantly better aerially, as seen by his aerial duels 1 percentage rate, which sits at 57.9% in the 96th percentile when compared against every other striker in Europe's top 5 leagues over the past 365 days, whereas Gyokeres' in the Champions League is significantly lower at 30.8% in just the 27th percentile. And so I can see why Arteta may prefer Sesko to Gyokeres, whilst Ruben Amorim prefers Gyokeres, with the RB Leipzig man in my opinion being better suited against deeper defensive blocks, linking play when space is tight, but also being someone who is a greater offensive threat from crossing situations, whereas Amorim's build-up strategy is highly dependent on having a centre forward with the pace and power of Gyokeres, who also has the technical ability to be able to receive direct passes from deep when the opposition man-to-man press United high, and the centre forward is left isolated with the centre backs around the halfway line. Now in terms of who the better of the two is, I think you'd have to say Gyokeres at the moment, due to his more consistent ball striking, more efficient ball manipulation around the box in order to work shooting angles, as well as his offensive instincts and movement in order to get into high value goal scoring positions. However, I do think that Benjamin Sesko's potential is higher, and even though it may take him 1, 2 or even 3 years, eventually with the right coaching I do think Sesko will start to improve in all of these areas that I've specified that Gyokeres is currently better in, which alongside his technical superiority, aerial ability and the absurd ball striking ability that he does possess, will see him not only become a better striker than Gyokeres, but also potentially the best striker in world football. And that's because I think he could eventually start putting up the sort of goal scoring output numbers that we currently see from players like Haaland. And when you look at the rest of his game in comparison, I think you can make a fair case that when Sesko gets to his mid-20s, maybe even late 20s, he actually surpasses Haaland as an overall centre forward package. However, the question is whether Sesko's enormous price tag at this moment in time, which has recently been reported at over £90 million, but I think will likely end up around 65 to maybe 70 million, is actually worth it for any team this summer given his current ability. At RB Leipzig currently, when you look at his goal scoring output in terms of total goals, it certainly doesn't look as impressive as Gyokeres is, and probably also when you focus on their non-penalty goals per 90 this season as well. Although I would say that a lot of that is down to Sesko's non-penalty XG not being that high, rather than how clinical he is when he gets those chances, which I think is primarily down to the role that he plays at Leipzig. As for most of this season under Marco Rose, Sesko was playing in a front two in a 4-2-2 system alongside Lois Openda, and this has meant that fairly frequently Sesko has been the player to drop off or pull wide looking to link the attack, with Openda often being the forward that holds a high and central position alongside the centre backs in and around the box. If he was used as a sole centre forward in either Arteta or Amorim's possession system, where he isn't required to pull wide or drop deep as much, I think we will see Sesko's non-penalty XG increase, and this will lead to him getting high value chances more frequently, which should result in his goal scoring numbers increasing. Because when you do look at his various FB ref reports over this season and last, Sesko is someone who is consistently overperforming his non-penalty XG, showing that he is a consistent and clinical finisher. I think anything over maybe 65-70 million is definitely going to be too much for either United or Arsenal, and considering Gyokeres' current ability, I think you'd have to say that he is a better option for both. However, if Gyokeres does go to Arsenal, I don't think that Sesko is a bad option for United if they can't get Osimhen, and potentially could get the fee for Sesko down to around 65 million. Now, people will of course make comparisons with the Rasmus Højlund deal because their ages and the fee is around the same, but Sesko's finishing ability with either foot and aerially is far better than Højlund's ever was, and his link play and really his all-round game is levels above Højlund's. If the Gyokeres alternative is going to be someone like Mateta for like 40 to 45 million, to be honest, I'd much rather pay the extra 20 to 25 million for Sesko, who I actually think would probably be better than Mateta in Amorim's system. Alexander Sorloth for around 35 million may be a harder choice, as both players are around a similar current ability. Maybe Sorloth just edges it, but potential wise Sesko is definitely clear. But then it comes down to whether you want to drop 35 million on a striker who is 30 in December, or pay the extra 30 and bank on a 21-year-old Sesko coming in and adapting straight away and also fulfilling his potential long term. Obviously it depends on United's budget as well as other signings, but despite suggesting Sorloth, I think if Sesko was no more than 65 million, I do like the idea of going for him, though the price tag could obviously rule him out, so you do have to factor that in. So let me know who you would prefer at United or at Arsenal, Benjamin Sesko or Gyokeres, and if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. You can use code Atlantis at checkout for a 10% discount. I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comment section below. And if you want to check out my Patreon, sign up to the Instagram group chat or read any of my articles, I'll leave it linked on the end screen now as well.